and just for future reference. Okay, so this is Theater 3290 Script Analysis, Spring 2021. Horrible. We've been suffering, all of us. I'm sure you're getting antsy to do something different, as am I. This is usually the time that over the holidays that I usually travel. And so I've had to stick in my room. It's very boring. But there's a future. Things are going to improve. That's what we're promised. Okay, so this course is entirely online. Although, you know, it's live. And so it's not online and not live, which I've taught before. Which gave me a lot of flexibility because I taught a course while I was in India. And consequently, all the lectures came from India. And I had to get up at 3 in the morning to deliver them, which wasn't a great thing, but that was the way it was. So this is live. I'll tell you if we're going to make any changes as we go along. And if you have any questions, you should feel free to contact me and ask me about what you have in mind. Okay, so the syllabus essentially says that we meet from 11:10 to 12:25, which gives us the proper 75 minutes in class. My office is here, 367 Fine Arts. If any of you need to meet with me at some point, we'll all wear masks and we'll leave doors open and ventilation. There's plenty of good ventilation in this room. As you can see coming over here on my left-hand side is a huge bank of windows. So we're getting a lot of light in this room. The cell phone is my personal cell phone and you can contact me. I ask that you contact me if you need to contact me at a reasonable time, not earlier than 8 a.m. and not later than 8 p.m. If you need to reach me by phone, okay? Simply because I've got other things I have to do. And hopefully if there's some reason why you have to meet me at some other particular time, then just shoot me an email, okay? Okay, so this is focused on, basically this is a play reading class in some ways. In other ways, it's a play analysis class, and I'll point out why I think there's a big difference there. According to our course description, plays are often thought of as blueprints for productions. But before a production of a play may be conceived and constructed, a thorough knowledge of the blueprint is necessary whether you are a performer, director, or designer. Playwrights may even benefit by carefully analyzing other writers' blueprints. The purpose of this course is to introduce you to two approaches to how plays work. Okay, I have typically taught the course with only one approach, but all of a sudden when I had all this time on my hands during the break, I read another work which I'm familiar with and decided that we could blend the two works together to analyze plays. And so I'll introduce you to them in a few minutes. Granted, there are many ways to approach a play, but there are these two ways have virtues which I like, and I hope you will like them too. They're both particularly useful to theater practitioners if they're willing to use them, either one or both of them, without cutting corners. Pay close attention and apply and reapply the principles and methods that you learn, and you'll be surprised at the positive results you get every time you use them. So in a sense, this is like acting. It's a practical course. There are things you're going to have to do that are practical. And as though you were either a director or a designer or a actor or a producer or even a playwright. There are things about these approaches that you'll be able to use, I think, in future, and I urge you to try to do them as you approach every play you read. From time to time, reference will be made to film, television scripts, but because of the constraints of time, we cannot examine this large body of literature in any detail. Now, as we become more interested in film in this class and in this department, we'll be bringing in, and probably should have, a separate course for dealing with scripts for film and television. We probably should do that. And the guy that first conceived of having a course in which he called it script analysis had that in mind. And I think, and that was over 10 years ago, actually 20 years ago, when this course was conceived. And, but it's changed over time to be more focused on plays and less on film and television. That doesn't mean we can't go the other direction in future. But I think if you just apply what you are interested in to this, I think you'll understand that there's a good bridge that exists between these various approaches. Class meets at 11:10, and I ask that you be on time for class just so that you don't miss anything. And also you can share with the rest of us things that you're studying. Okay, evaluation, this is very simple. 3 exams will be given. Each of the 3 exams is worth 25 points. Your final assignment is a project, and details of which I'll explain later, and that is also worth 25 points. So essentially you're assembling points towards a grade. And I'll explain to you how those points translate into A, B, C, D, etc. On this syllabus, I've mentioned final note, warning, warning. This has to do with academic honesty, etc. I do want to point out that 2 people in the class last semester did a naughty thing. One of them copied the other's material and submitted it as though it was their own. Well, they got in trouble because I picked that up. And they were very apologetic. They said, well, we studied together. That was all right, except they didn't say that in what they submitted. And so what if one studies together, I have no problems with that as long as we know who and what is doing what. So that you don't try to take advantage of the fact that I've got so many things to have to read that I might skip over or miss one of these things. I don't think any of you are like that, but I just want to say that you don't want to run the risk of having me raise that issue with you. Okay. In a previous course, this goes back a couple of years, we had to go to the vice president's office to deal with this issue because there was some real I think, attempt to camouflage what these 2 people were doing. And ultimately, they weren't kicked out of the university, but they came close to being. So just do your own work. That's basically what I suggest. If there are any people with disabilities that you'd like to raise with me, just email me and let me know so that we can talk about what that may mean. Generally speaking, it would probably have to do with these exams because except for the final exam, which is on the finals day, and which we have 3 whole hours for the final exam, the first 2 exams are only as long as this class. And so that means that if you have a disability that you'd like to apply to that exam, you need to let me know so we can release time for you to do that and complete your exam. Okay, turning quickly to the tentative script analysis schedule for this spring. Today is, of course, the introductory day and the assignments, and particularly the syllabus doesn't list what your assignments are at this point in time, so I want you to copy down what I'm going to say to you, because essentially between now and Tuesday, I would like you to go online and under the tools section, as you know, you can assignments where you write assignments. I've asked you to explain something about yourself to me so I get a better picture of who you are, what your interests are. And this can be a whole wide range of things that you can say about yourself. I think I've also on the title page, the home page of the course, put a connection to a YouTube video about me, which I had to develop a few years ago. So I look a little younger than I do now. And it tells you something about my interests, my background, my experiences, etc. So you can look at that. It takes about maybe 9 minutes to see that. But go online and complete something about yourself and submit that. And then we do a systematic way to understand the play Trifles. I've for years used Trifles. Some of you may have read it. How many of you have actually read Trifles? Anybody here? A couple of people, maybe. One person I see, two hands. Okay, Trifles, very important play historically. It had to do with the women's rights movement in the early part of the 20th century, and a very important work itself, and also a really excellent play. So we'll deal with Trifles, and you can download the script on the content page. It explains how you do that. I may also put up shortly a film that covers Trifles as presented by some social scientists talking about among themselves about Trifles itself and its importance in order to understand how law and the law has affected the characters in this play. And these are laws that aren't explained in the play, but which are, as you understand the context of the writing of the play, you understand why the playwright may have written this play the way she has. A number of the plays in this classic course are by women. And toward the end, I've tried to include more plays by women in order that we get different voices coming into to the scene. And between Thursday of next week, the 21st and the 26th, you should answer questions on the assignment page concerning Trifles. So there are a list of questions that I've posed there, and you can see them on the assignment page. It just gives you a list of I've forgotten how many questions, but basically they're the kind of questions you should be asking yourself as you originally just to read a play for the first time, trying to get some sense of your response to the play. Okay, we'll get more definite about what you should do thereafter. Okay, so what are the plays that we're reading? But before we do that, let me talk about these two books that I've suggested to you that I'm using as a sort of textbook. And I suggest that you go online and order both of these books. You don't have to, because for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to put online the chapters that we're dealing with for the next 2 weeks. But thereafter, having one or both of these books in your possession would be useful to you in future. And I looked online to see how much they were. Approximately each one of those worth about $20. And some of them you can order and hear them read aloud by the author. Okay, so or you can do so. They're available on audio or Audible, and they're also in text form so that you can read them online, and you can rent them. At least one of them is rentable. Okay, so the two texts are David Ball's Backwards and Forwards. And it has a subtitle, A Technical Manual for Reading Plays. That should pique your interest, technical. Suggesting to you, it's sort of like, how do I use my iPhone? I should read the instructions, right? For what to look for in the iPhone and what the iPhone does for me. In David Ball's case, he sees his suggestions as tools for analyzing plays. So it's not using your imagination, which we often emphasize in acting classes. How do you use your imagination to work with a character? This has to do with using them as though this was a kind of mechanical approach to analysis. Anyway, Ball's work is one of the, I think was designated as one of the very popular works available on Amazon. The second work is by Cal Prittner and Scott Walker, and they wrote a book called Introduction to Play Analysis. This is the thing that I read recently that I found interesting. And it's the second edition that if you're going to order it, be sure you're ordering the second edition of this work so that you get the most up-to-date. I think it was published in 2017, the second edition. So it's had some changes, I think, although they're mostly modest changes. Okay, so having read both of them and taught at least one of them frequently, both works are designed to meet the needs of those who read, act, direct, design, produce, and yes, even write plays meant to be performed on the stage. So these works are not emphasis on the literary aspect of the play. I think that when you, I was taught plays mostly from the literary point of view. In the old days, that's how we did things. We didn't teach plays and explain how to use plays from a point of view of a theater practitioner. More emphasis was given on how it fits into literature and the literary side of analysis. These works are not designed that way. They make it very specific. They're not designed that way. To begin with, I'll just say a few words about Prittner and Walter's Introduction to Play Analysis. First of all, these two guys use terms, traditional terms, to explain their approach. And traditional, I'll explain which ones they are. Terms such as conflict, given circumstances, protagonist, conflict resolution, inciting moment, resolution, plot, story, denouement, action, beats, thought, ideas, emotions, etc. Many of these terms come from Aristotle, who is thought to have set forward the notion of analyzing plays, and Stanislavski, the great 19th, 20th century teacher of acting and actor-director. So Prittner and Walters are much focused on things that are more familiar to theater students today. Ball, I'll explain how that differs from Ball in a minute. The second thing I want to point out, at the heart of their approach is conflict resolution. That's the heart of their teaching, conflict resolution. By this, they mean a character who is described by them as a protagonist, in quotes, comes into conflict described by them as the essence of drama. That's the essence of drama in their view. With some other force, so this character comes into conflict with some other force that must be met and overcome before the play ends. So their notion is very clear. They've made it very clear that's what they're driving at here. The moment when the character takes up the challenge to make that effort is described as engagement. In other words, it's when do the characters engage with each other? And that sets in motion, let's see, let me read it instead of trying to improvise it. The moment when the character takes up the challenge is described as engagement. This struggle ends with the final outcome, as they describe it, as the climax. Okay, so they're using terminology that's familiar in Western, been familiar for a long period of time, which is that climax is quickly followed by a denouement, or a tying together of the loose ends at the very end of the play. Denouements are often maybe a few lines or a couple of words at the end of the play that sort of finishes off everything that's happened before, and means that, you know, there's not going to be any more play after this, or any need to have a continuation of the journey, because we've already accomplished the mission of the principal character of the protagonist finishing off what was necessary to be done in order to do other things. And so this outcome may be expressed as a dramatic question that may be briefly and succinctly stated. That is a dramatic question that ties everything up at the very end, and there's going to be nothing more after that. And we'll talk more about how to frame these dramatic questions soon. In other words, and I'll just paraphrase all of this, an inciting incident, this is the inciting incident, early in the plot leads to an engagement by the protagonist, which leads to the climax and finally a resolution of the conflict. Now, this is kind of a simple way of understanding how they go about analyzing scripts. And this followed by the cleanup business can be a few words, it can be a few sentences, and he talks a bit about this when it comes with, if you look at Oedipus Rex, at the very end of Oedipus, Oedipus comes into the final scene of the play, blinded himself. He's blinded himself, and he's stragglers on stage, etc., etc. And his only wish, asking Creon that he can see his daughters, Ismene and Antigone. He goes on to say he wants to fulfill his duty to be cast out of the city for what he's done, because that's what he promised at the beginning of the play. He promised to cast out the person who's responsible for these awful things that happened. He killed his father and married his mother, and these two children are they're related to him in a way that seems unfit. Creon says, no, you can't make that decision. Only God can make that decision. And he sends him into the house. So that going into the house is the denouement. It's that final crux at the end of the play that's the high point of the play, in which he tries to continue to hold on to power. It sounds familiar. It sounds very familiar today. I won't leave, I won't leave, I won't leave. And then he has to do what he's told to do. And eventually in this play, he does leave. He goes into the house. We don't know until we read other plays related to Oedipus, what his outcome, what the final outcome is. But in this case, this is the approach that's taken. Does that make sense? In other words, an inciting incident early in the plot leads to the engagement by the protagonist, which leads to a climax and finally the resolution of the climax. And that's the following denouement. Okay? Now, yes, anybody have any questions about that? Yes, sir.
So you're saying that the denouement and the dramatic question are going hand in hand? I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything like that.
The dramatic question describes how all of these events tied together. It's it's very simply stated, and therefore you need to think. Actually, I usually read a play and think about what's the dramatic question as I'm reading the play. What question should be answered by the end of the play?
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
think it's very clear in most plays. It isn't always clear in some plays. For example, you're going to read Beckett's play. Some of you may have read it in a theater class already. Play is a complicated piece of work that is so different from everything else you've read, and most of his plays are, that it's hard to make out what the dramatic question might well be at this end of this play. But because all of his works are described as plays, in fact, it has the title play, but the title refers to actually something else besides a play as a play. Play meaning playful, like play activity of these characters. Anyway, we'll get to play when we move along. Okay, now how does that compare to David Ball's work? And let me briefly give you a background on David Ball. David Ball's Backwards and Forwards, an interesting title in itself. Anybody read Backwards and Forwards or have a copy of it by any chance? One of you, two of you. Okay, so you're already intelligent enough. You know, you can teach this and I don't have to do this, right? Nah, all right. Let me go ahead. I'm selfish. I have to go ahead and talk to you. Okay, there's some marked differences between Ball's approach to play analysis from the approach that's taken that I just described. To quote Ball, climax, point of attack, denouement, rising action, falling action, spine, and Aristotle's plot, character, and thought, along with a myriad of other terms, reflect a myriad of approaches to scripts. And he says about his book, this book uses terms in carefully defined ways. By understanding terms as used in this book, you will be halfway to understanding the methods they comprise. So he's essentially saying, I'm not using all that stuff that's been used in the past by these people like Prittner and Walters. I'm not going to use that stuff, okay? It goes on to say that script analysis is an exacting craft. He doesn't say it's an art. He says it's a craft. How-to, it's a how-to book. And its terms are your tools. And you want to be clear on the precise nature of your tools. And he goes on to say, if you can't distinguish a hammer from an axe, you won't build much of a house, nor will you chop down much of a tree. So you've got to know precisely what this thing does and know it from his point of view. He's trying to make clear to you. Okay, Ball, the second point here is that Ball divides his work into three parts: shape, method, and tricks of the trade. Hearing all of that, you would say to yourself, what's all this got to do with anything? Well, each part is divided into or subdivided into chapters. Okay, chapter 1, for example, focuses on action. Ball is in favor of talking about the action of the play, and he says a play is a series of actions. A play is action. And of course, action or act, actor, all come from similar beginnings in Greece, talking about essentially movement. They suggest movement. According to him, something happens that causes something else to happen. Something happens that causes something else to happen. Okay, although it may seem like he is talking about plot, as Prittner and Walters have said, but he argues forcibly sequential action, analysis of actions is most useful when done backwards. He says, learning what the actions are won't help you unless you go backwards to the front of the play. So you should be looking to see what has caused the results. So here you have, and he goes on in the book to talk about triggers, that's an action, and heaps, this is what happens after the action. Triggers and heaps. So actions have consequences, but they go systematically from the beginning to the end of the play. Everything in the play happens in clock time. Even though incidents in the play may not happen in clock time, but the play itself is a clock time activity. Audiences come in, they pay their price, they sit down in their seat, they watch the play, and they're counting, oh, it's 15 minutes to intermission or 20 minutes to intermission. And the play may have all sorts of things about time in them. But the point is it flows from beginning to end. So action, very crucial for ball in terms of how it works. All right. Where we go back. Here we are. There is much more that is original in Ball's analysis, but we don't have time to consider it here as we progress through a combined approach to both Prittner and Walters and Ball. I mean to highlight the differences and virtues of considering both systems when examining each play this semester. So, excuse me, I found some reasons why I think it's more helpful to bring in some of those things that Prittner and Walters have suggested be done in terms of play analysis, which are not done by Ball, but I think students find them more useful in some ways. Okay, both works are clear about one thing. A single reading of a play is not enough. A single reading of a play is not enough. Ball says a single reading of a play does not scratch the surface. Now that you are beginning to understand analytic techniques of play reading, that is, having read his book, you should see that several readings are essential to begin with. So just because you've read the play once, oh, I know what the plot is, et cetera, forget it. There's so many things you don't know with a play, even the most simple of the plays. I deal with a play that's only 3 pages long called Perfect, which is a play written about a woman who is, and this is the way it works. She's introduced as a character who's having a eating in a dinner party with her friend, and the friend has set her up with some guy. Okay, and this guy makes an appearance just once at the very beginning about when are you going to serve the coffee? And so then he leaves and the two women start talking about, you see how good he is, how wonderful he is. He's so handsome. He's got this kind of car. He makes this much money at the business. They all work at the same business. You know, he's perfect for you. He's perfect for you. The inciting incident is that she says, who did he vote for in the last election? Okay, so that's the inciting incident that then raises toward the end. Finally, her friend gets really fed up with her for having set this up because she says, this is a disaster. The dinner party's ruined. If you go in and ask him this question, this will be the end of everything. Because suppose he voted for the person you don't like, then that's it. And then she goes back into the dining room and the guy comes forward and asks this woman, they start talking and he says, you know, I like you. And she says, well, I like you very much. You know, I'd like to, you know, do you want to date? Yes. He says, do you want to go to bed with me? She says, yes. And then as they're embracing and having their first kiss, she says, who did you vote for in the last election? Okay, and that's the end of the play. So what we've done is we've come through this work and pop, we hit the work at the very end, and that's the end. The denouement comes right after that. They kiss. Okay. Okay, so essentially, you need to read the work carefully to understand how it is composed and how it works together. Okay. And he says, Ball says, never waltz into your first rehearsal or design conference with only a reading or two behind you. That's like learning to drive on ice while already skidding towards a cliff. And we all know what that's like if you've driven a car very much. Okay, the words in a script are intended to be spoken aloud, Ball says. Before your first rehearsal or conference, read the play out loud to yourself. So I'm charging you to read Trifles out loud to yourself before you come to class on Tuesday. And see where you get. It's a short play, takes about 15, 20 minutes to read. Okay. It is online. You'll find it on ELC, but please note that the version that's there has a couple of things that are titled ahead of it before you can scroll down. You need to scroll down to get to the play itself. So be sure and scroll down on that piece so you get the full text of the play, because it's got some things written by people analyzing the play. At the end of it, there are other analyses that are made, and I'm going to put up this 40-minute film so you can take a look at the discussion about the play. And to tell you how important this play is, that basically a couple of years ago, we had a woman who performs a scene she's devised, having read this play and taught this play, a scene that she's devised in which she pretends to be the woman who has purportedly killed her husband. And she talks to the audience as though she's answering questions the audiences are giving her about does she feel guilty? What happened to her in this process? It was held in the Performing Arts Center here in the Fine Arts Building. When she came and talked with us and did a little scene from that piece. So it's a really interesting play and got so many sides to it that it's hard to not talk about them. Okay, so very quickly. Okay, so this is the version of Prittner and Walters that you may or may not want to order, and this is backwards and forwards. Very small. All of these texts are pretty small. I usually like texts that are very small. They don't take up much room on your bookshelf. So I'm going to then post both of these. This is chapter 1 of the Prittner book, and this is the introduction to the Prittner book, and I'm going to upload that so that you'll have access to these two things before, because if you order your stuff now, if you've got Prime, you'll get the stuff overnight. If you don't, it may take at least a week, if not 2 weeks. So I'm counting on the assumption that it will take at least 2 weeks for these two books to get into your hands. If not, I have not ordered them for the bookstore because I'm fed up with dealing with all that. The bookstore has been problematic from the beginning. Okay, Trifles this is the script of Trifles. I've copied it off. It's downloadable from your little machine. The Prittner and Walters actually put a lot of attention on, and they've used Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie. How many of you have not read The Glass Menagerie? Okay, so this will come as something new to you. This is a wonderful play. This is a whole book on The Glass Menagerie. It's the play itself plus comments by Tony Kushner, who wrote Angels in America. And it's a wonderful piece. And then I'll tell you about this piece in connection with me going to Lincoln Center and taking notes on the play as performed by several different theater companies. in order to get, because I was supposed to direct this play and the virus hit, and that was the end of that. Okay, so it'll be interesting to consider that. I have downloaded from the internet Sophocles' play Antigone. And so this is the Antigone that we'll be reading. And I may just upload this to the internet so you'll have access to it. Also, we're reading The Imposter, Tartuffe, the play Tartuffe. Some of you shake your head, you've read Tartuffe. How many of you read Tartuffe? Yeah.
I've seen it.
You've seen it, okay, good.
Yeah, I haven't read it before.
Okay, I've directed the play. I directed the play a few years ago in New Jersey. And Antigone, how many of you read Antigone? Probably high school, it's high school stuff. Okay, good. I think that the Watling translation is the one that is the best from my point of view. It reads more like an actor's translation, as does this, and this is translated by Christopher Hampton for a 1983 production in London. And I find because the more common translation of Tartuffe is of the translation which has rhymed verses. And you all may find that very difficult to go through. The people that I worked with in Jersey when I produced the play didn't like the translation with the verses, but they did like this version. So we did this one. And then Hamlet. This is lists of, these are all my translations act by act. I used the first quarto. The first quarto, and this raises the whole issue about what are quartos, what are folios, etc. Who can tell me what a quarto is? Okay. When Shakespeare was doing his works, they were, let's see if I can use this paper. Okay, a folio is one fold of a paper. A quarto is this way, and it's 4 different sheets. So the cheap copies of Shakespeare's work were done in quartos because you could get more lines on the page with a quarto than you could with a folio. The folios are bigger sheet things, and consequently, there are fewer folios available. Why are there 2 quartos for Hamlet? And why is there not a relationship, close relationship between all of these? Because we don't know where the quartos came from. They're the earliest publication of Shakespeare's works, especially the first quarto. And I'll explain that to you later when we get to dealing with Shakespeare. Then A Doll's House. How many of you read Doll's House? Yeah, lots of you. Okay, good. This happens to be a translation by Simon Stevens. And when we get involved with translations of things, we'll talk a bit about translations, because it does make a difference what the translation of these works are. And then Moon Over Buffalo. How many of you have read that? Carol Burnett played in it on Broadway not long ago. Wonderful, funny, very, very, very funny comedy. Anyway, that is to be gotten. This is it is play by Beckett, small, very small, and God of Carnage. Okay, anybody read God of Carnage? Anybody see God of Carnage? Okay. I just finished directing this in New Jersey. Okay, so this is an interesting play because it has 4 characters that are on the stage virtually the whole time. Family, 2 families. About their child, one of the children broke the teeth of one of the other family's kid, and now they're meeting for the first time to talk about what to do about it. Very good play. And Arsonist. Any of you read The Arsonist? Okay. Arsonist is by Max Frisch, about an imaginary scene in which a family takes in arsonists who are there to burn down things. But they greet them as though they're long lost friends until they find out what their job is. It's very interesting. And finally, Dead Man's Cell Phone. Any of you read that? Yeah, okay, couple of three. Okay, wonderful play. And all of these plays you can get at your own leisure online. It's up to you to decide whether you're going to order copies, whether you're going to try to find free copies or not. I'm kind of leaving it up to you. I haven't ordered it for the bookstores or any bookstore. Okay, but they come in that order. So the final few plays, beginning with play itself, are at the very tail end of the course. But we start with the plays that have been suggested that we read by these people who created these two books. Ball uses Hamlet in particular as a way of explaining his point of view. And in part, that's because he worked in connection with the he was a dramaturg at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. Okay, and he had a close knowledge work, and the play Hamlet was done at the Guthrie Theater, in which one of our one of our faculty members, graduate students who went off to Hollywood and became well known, acted in that play. And it was at the same time this guy was working in Minneapolis. Okay, so you're already fired up, I hope. This should be a great challenge. It should be relatively easy, however. I don't see this as being one of the things that's going to make you stumble for life, but it's going to take some reading. You're going to have to read, okay? And try to read carefully. And as he suggested to you with reading aloud, read aloud to yourself. I just finished maybe a month ago, this group I work with in New Jersey, we read 28 plays aloud, and during the critical moments over the spring and summer and into this fall. They were finished with House of Bernarda Alba by Garcia Lorca, and with this production that I just mentioned of God of Carnage. But when you get together and read with a group of students, it's very interesting. And these people in Jersey are all people who are professional people who work in mostly in high tech areas. They're tech people. Some of them are CEOs for tech companies. One of the actors was in India and read with us. Which is a trick to try to organize a time frame so that you can have this guy in India reading with these people in Jersey. Also in Washington, D.C., we had an actress from D.C. who was also working with us. So read plays as many as possible. Okay. Anyway, your assignment is to read all these plays this semester. Okay, so I'll see you if you don't have any further questions. I'll see you on Tuesday. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.